Hey, it's Drybear. Today we're going to go over Phase 2 or Gate 2 of Valtan, facing Valtan himself, and we'll cover all the mechanics you need to know to defeat him. And as always, we'll split this video into two parts. Part 1, I will cover the entire fight, all the important mechanics in just 60 seconds, and then we'll go into the second part of the video where we'll go into much more detail for anyone who's looking for extra help. So let's go! But first, if you have any questions or comments for me, you'll find me live every day on twitch.tv/Drybear. Who knows? I might even be streaming right now. Let's kick things off with Valtan Gate 2 in just 60 seconds. At start, Valtan has 2 stacks of armor you need to remove. Have him run into a wall to stagger him, use corrosive and destruction grenades to break his armor, then collect blue orbs to survive his big AoE or use Balthor. He then destroys the arena. When rocks spawn, stand behind them to survive the AoE. If you are targeted, aim the red cone away from your group, then dash at the last second to survive. If his axe is sideways, stand on the handle and don't hit him. At X85, he destroys one side, then spins to the middle. Run to the opposite side, and then the rock mechanic will happen again. At X65 is counter phase. After cutscene, everyone stands in front of him and throws out their counter. You have to counter him here. He will also do a sequence of 3 counter attacks. One at a time, counter him, then step aside. Players who counter are silenced and will silence others they stand near. He dies and enters ghost phase. Avoid the red grab, counter ghosts on the edge, and then hit Valtan to remove his buff stacks. Oh, that was hard. All right, that is Valtan in 60 seconds. We are now going to go into detail to some of the mechanics I didn't cover, as they're rather self-explanatory. We're also going to go further in detail on all the mechanics that you'll face when going up against Valtan to make sure that you down this cow for good. And I think the best way to go through this fight is to go through it chronologically. The first state you're going to find Valtan in is this state here. He has the arena with the half walls and the big walls on the side, and he'll have 2 stacks of armor on him. You need to remove these stacks of armor before you move on, because if you actually push him to X120 or X110 on the health bar count, he will have these armor stacks on him for the remainder of the fight. It's permanent, so you have to remove these before you move on to the next part. So how do you do that? All you have to do is get him to charge into one of the solid walls on the outside of the arena. When he does this, he'll bang his head, stagger, and then you can use weak point to destroy his armor. It's a lot of armor, so normally what people will do is start the fight, run up to the edge on the far right. You can see this wall that we're standing in front of. You wait for him to charge right away. He cannot collide with these half walls in the middle or he'll stop his charge. Then get out of the way after the 3rd punch, so he runs into the wall. He staggers. Make sure one person in the raid throws a corrosive grenade or corrosive bomb that will apply a +1 to all weak point. And then everyone in the raid throws destruction grenades and all their weak points out to remove it. And then he'll RNG charge again. And you want to make sure that you're hitting these walls each time, staggering him, throwing out all your weak point, and breaking off his armor before you move on. Now, there's a few things to cover about this part. He does do this bombardment. He'll go up in the air. Everyone in the raid will start getting these targets on their ground that will start landing around them and knocking them. And then after about 7 or 8 of these, a big AoE will spawn, and the only safe spot is at the very edge of the arena, and it's only where parts of the arena have been destroyed. Now, this part can be a huge mess, and let's talk about how you can make this less of a mess. So as you can see the way I'm moving right here, get a good still for this. So you can see that it just keeps landing on everyone that's moving. And this will knock anyone that hits it. And you can actually get chain knocked by these and get locked into a corner. So the best thing is for everyone to spread out, stay away from each other so you're not dropping bombs on each other. And the best advice I can give you, sometimes people will start and then run in this long line across the arena. I think the best way to do it is just to run in a small square. So if you imagine you're the corner of a square, using the circles that you have, just create this little square that you have and then run in this square pattern, because when you have the circles crossing over, every time you get a new one, you'll step away from it. And this makes sure that the area that you're in is highly efficient. You're not getting knocked too hard by other people, and you're able to move and get to the edge of the arena at the last second. If you get stuck, you'll have to use a time stop to avoid the damage, And then just know that afterwards he may go straight into a charge, so you have to get next to a wall so that he staggers and you can throw your weak point. The next big check comes at about X130. It depends on how much damage you're doing, but he'll do this big, massive AoE. He'll slam the ground once and then make this kind of AoE that goes around him in this star-shaped pattern with holes in it. And then he'll follow that up with a big AoE that will kill you if you don't have protection. There are two ways to get to protection from this. The first way, as the normal way, is going to be these right here. Every wall that he destroys has blue orbs on it. When they fall down, if you collect one, you will become resistant to that big AoE. So the normal way to do this is to have him destroy all 4 walls, which have 2 orbs on top. That's 8 orbs total. Everyone gets an orb. And then you push him down to, past X130 so that you can avoid the damage. The cheese way, the way that you will probably experience in more pugs is the way you see on screen, which is the raid leader at around X131 or X130 will throw out Balthor, which makes you immune to knockbacks, greatly gives you damage reduction, and you survive the AoE. But once you push past this, you're now going into the second part of the fight, which is this here, where he will no longer charge. He just has this major arena. He's going to blow away the walls, and then you're moving forward with the fight. And this part typically comes at about X120. The timing can vary depending on your damage output, and you'll do this until you hit about X110, where he will then move on to the next part. He'll do this ground AoE on the ground, avoid it, and then he immediately follows it up with the rock mechanic. So he'll spawn 4 rocks around the arena. He'll do this cutscene where he jumps up and lands back down on the ground. And then the next thing that you want to do is figure out who's being targeted. So he will stand in the middle, and then he'll create this massive cone that targets one person. So what you want to do is spread out from other people. As you can see, we get some distance here so that we're away from everyone, because you want to determine right away who the target of it is. Whoever is dead center on that cone is the target, and their goal is to wait until the last second, dash away to avoid getting hit, and then get behind a rock. Everybody else needs to get behind a rock for the yellow knockback damage to survive, so that they're standing here when it goes off, then they can leave the rock and attack. Afterwards, he will target usually the same person, but not always. It can be someone different as well, and he'll throw the cone out. A few things on this as well is that when he targets a rock, he'll cause it to explode. So make sure you're not aiming this. If you are the target, make sure you're not aiming this at a rock that has people behind it, because it'll blow up and you'll deal damage to them. You cannot time stop the red cone, but you can time stop the yellow. So if you have to, you can't reach a rock, dash out at the last second, and then time stop the yellow to avoid it. And then he will blow the rocks up, and usually, almost always, maybe 90% of the time, the rocks will blow up, and then he will have, he'll spin. So if you're a melee class, I always tell my melee to just be ready for it. So when it happens, the rocks explode, just watch out for melee, because he'll usually do a spin after. Then at X85, you'll get a warning on screen. He'll do this little roar. He'll jump up into the air, and then he'll choose one side of the platform. So you can see he chose the right side here. He'll then start carving out the platform, which will limit the space that you're in. When you see this happen, everyone needs to go all the way over to the other side, because what will happen is he will land over here, destroy the red area you see here, and then he'll spin his way back into the middle. So if you're in this middle platform when he's there, you're going to take damage from him, and then you'll get pushed around. But once this platform gets destroyed and that edge gets exposed, you can now fall off that side and die instantly. So you want to be very careful by standing around. Remember, yellow is a big knockback. You cannot walk off, so it's safe to run against the edge of the platform, but it is not safe to be there if he's knocking or doing any knockbacks or spins or hits, because you'll fall off and instantly die. You can use time stop to prevent it, but it's very, very important that you stay away from the edge if he's attacking. After he does the spin, he will always create rocks in the middle. He does this for both sides of the platform. It's the same mechanic, just stand behind it if you're not being targeted to avoid the knockback. He'll do this cone attack again. And usually I recommend people go to the safe side, the side that doesn't have a ledge on it, because after the rocks explode that he attacked, the ones that he didn't attack will explode, and you'll want to get to a safe spot. This is fine when there's a spot here, but there is it gets harder when the platform's smaller. Now in this state, when he does the bombardment, jumps up there and does the bombardment, the best thing to do is stack together and then run around together. because he'll do this bombardment, which is the same as before, but then he will create this, he'll land back down with an AoE. So you can see this here, where there's an AoE spawning here. You have to rush to this spot as fast as you can, because after he lands after the bombardment, the next thing he's going to do is do AoE everywhere he didn't land on, right? So if you're out here, you're going to take damage from it. It might kill you. So if you see the bombardment, usually people run together and then run to where he's landing, which targets a random person in the raid. And then you'll stay there in the safe spot. He'll also gain an attack where he roars and glows blue like this. So let's look at this a few times. You'll see him roar and glow blue like this with a big shockwave. He will then raise his axe backward and then start charging it. What you have to do here is you have to look at the axe itself. You can see it in the corner of the area here. You can actually kind of barely see it here. But look at the axe itself. If it has two states, either it's glowing or it's not glowing, and that tells you what you have to do next. In this particular case, you can see that the axe over here is glowing, and what that means is that he's going to deal damage right in front of him. And so the safe spot is always going to be on the outside in that case. So to simplify things, as it can be spoken in reverse, if it's glowing, stay away. If it's not glowing, you have to stand in front of him to get to the safe spot. So you see here, we recognize that his axe is glowing. I ping outside. We run outside and we stay alive. If he does that again and his axe is not glowing, you have to stand right in front of him, which is probably the harder version since you could be across the map and not realize it. You have to run all the way into him, and the damage from this does do a lot. A rare attack in this phase you'll get is going to be this incapacitate. So he'll do this big roar like this, where he'll roar and it'll pick usually like 3 people and he'll incapacitate them with the purple bar underneath them. And your job is to break them out of this before he attacks, because it's usually a one-shot. It depends on the class that gets hit. The best thing to do is have 2 or 3 people in your raid. As raid leader, I always bring flame grenades, but it's an easy thing to just throw flame grenades down, make sure they break out of it, and then you're good to go. He doesn't always do this attack. It's kind of rare, but when it does happen, you have to move quickly in order to break them out of the incapacitate. Then once you cross X65, you'll move into the counter phase. He will freak out, run to the middle, and then he'll slam the ground like this. You'll see a huge blue aura that appears, and there are secret events that will follow this. The first is that you'll get these ground AoEs. So always tell the raid, watch your feet, because you'll get these all underneath everyone that's standing when he does this. Then he'll play a cutscene where he's like, oh, my hand is so strong and I'm cool. And right after this is a necessary counter. So you'll see him take this stance here, where his axe is back, his hand is forward, and he's chilling. So what happens is you avoid the ground AoEs that are on the ground. Then every single person in the raid needs to go and stand directly in front of him, because about 2 to 3 seconds after this, it's random. He will throw out an attack that can be countered, and you must counter it. If you do not, anyone standing in front of him will get grabbed and then will be thrown off the edge. You have to counter this to move forward. So usually the best strat is just to get everyone to stand right in front of it. And then after about 2 or 3 seconds, everyone throws all their counter attacks at him at different intervals, and you just nail it. The timing on it is absolutely tiny. So the best thing is just to get everyone involved, slamming it out. And then once you pass that, it does get a little bit cleaner after that. Another rare attack is this stagger check that he'll do. He'll kind of channel up. He'll create this giant orb in front of him, and then you'll see that he does have a stagger bar underneath. This is something that I think people fail. It is rather rare. It doesn't come all that often, but when it comes, you have to pass it. You'll see that he does get a shield effect on his health bar. So he now has a shield around him. The way you pass this mechanic is you have to break the shield first, and then you have to pass the stagger. So everyone just needs to run in, deal enough damage to break the shield, and then do enough stagger damage to break the stagger check, and then you're good to go. And of course, he has his retaliation. So let's look at this a few times. He'll glow blue, turn his axe sideways, and start channeling. This is a retaliation. This is something that I think Western players are still learning what it is. But when he takes this stance, if you deal damage or enough stagger damage to him, he will retaliate and do a giant AoE. If you pass it, it looks like this, where he just does like a little forward attack. If you fail it, which means you dealt too much damage to him or too much stagger, he will spin in a circle and do a big knockback, which usually, if you have a small arena left, it'll knock everyone off and you'll wipe. So when you see this, where he glows blue and takes his axe to the side, The answer to this is to get everyone to stand right here. The AoE that he does when you pass it, it's like this big, so you can actually stand over here if you wanted to. I just use the handle because even if he does attack backwards or forwards, the handle is always safe. There will always be a safe zone right here at the end of the handle. And so usually people will just come stack here, guaranteeing their safety, and then everyone stands still until he's done. Don't attack him, don't trigger the retaliation, and you're good to go. Then at some point, he'll roar again. You won't get the text this time, but he'll destroy the left side of the platform, and you have to go all the way to the edge because he will spin to the middle again, and if you're standing near the middle, he'll knock you back and you will fall off the edge. So remember when this happens, remember you can't walk off the edge. It is a permanent ledge. You can't walk off. You can only be knocked off. So you can even just hold your cursor off the edge and run. And then he'll follow that up again with the rock mechanic. This time it's more deadly because you have less space to work with. So he'll roar, target someone. The best advice I can give you is if you are the person targeted here, like this artillerist is, remember that when he's done channeling, you have to get out of the way and you can't time stop this red. So the best thing to do, I see people that do this by going to the edge, and you'll notice that this distance here is far longer than this distance. So just go and stand right in front of him. And I usually just wiggle back and forth. Like I kind of just wiggle here until I see that the cone has stopped moving with me, which means that he's about to fire. And then you can dash out of the way. And then your goal is to aim it at like one rock if you can help it. Because this will be the same procession that happened before, where he'll shoot the cone in front, it'll destroy whatever rock it is targeting, and then after that rock explodes, the remaining ones explode. So what some people do is they'll try to hit 2 with it so that the only 2 follow after. But just remember, it's like in this case, like this is a good example here. So you can see that this is targeting this rock here. Now everyone knows that this rock is going to blow up first. And then afterwards, this is going to be your only safe spot on the whole platform to survive. And these rocks do a bunch of damage. So your big thing is going to see, okay, this one blows up. You can see I'm already hovering right here trying to get over because then these rocks will blow up. I think you actually can stand here, but it's better just to, especially when you're down to this small platform, run to where the first rock or first 2 rocks blew up. Get over to the safe spot and then get down. Do not waste time here. These rocks deal a lot of damage, and of course they can knock you off. And your goal in this phase is just to try to deal damage to him as steadily as you can without getting knocked off the edge or taking big damage. Obviously, since it's so small, if you see the AoE again, just try to err on the side of caution. Use time stop if you have to, or go to the very edge of the arena. Make sure you don't get hit there. But you're trying to burn him down to about X17. When he gets to X17, he will then transition into the last phase, but he'll start with this ground pound attack as he transitions into the ghost phase, and it looks like this. He'll put his axe down and start slamming the ground, and then for every slam that he does, he'll create an AoE around everyone in the group that then explodes, does massive knockback and huge damage, and will knock you off the ledge. Normally, the easiest way to deal with this is that around X15 or X16, the raid leader will throw out Balthor, and because it's a small area, you're going to get hit by a lot of knockbacks. This will prevent the knockbacks and give you big damage reduction so you can get through this part of the fight. As you get more advanced with the fight, you'll want to use Thirain for damage, and there's a couple ways you can deal with this ground pound. The most straightforward way is for, which is not pictured here, this is a pug that I was running. But what you'll do is you'll get everyone together to stand in one spot when he puts his axe down, and then you'll just have everyone move in the same direction as a group. This is a very clean way to handle it because all of the AoEs will be here. You'll move to a new spot. All the AoEs will be here. You'll move to a new spot. All the AoEs will be here. And then at the last second, when he does his AoE, you just dash into him after that AoE to avoid the following knockback. Now, what they'll do to be super clean about this, there's even a more sexy way to do this. That's usually only happens in like hell mode. But what they'll do is like right as he starts, everyone stacks together. Everyone stacks together in front of him. And then when he gets to 3 pounds, so he goes 1, 2, 3, at the 3rd pound, everyone time stops. And then by the time the time stop is done, you've passed all the AoEs, you're good to go, and then you just dash in the middle. So if you're running for advanced strats or you have a good group of friends that are playing, you'll go, oh, boom, put the axe down, 1, 2, 3, time stop, and then you're good to go. Then he'll die, kind of, not really. and then he'll get back up. It's like a Marvel death. He's dead, but not really. So he goes down, and then right afterwards, he goes into his final phase, as you can see on screen, the ghost phase. The platform is still small, but you have a couple mechanics left to deal with here. The first one is going to be avoiding his grab. So you'll see his eyes glow red. That signifies a grab. He'll have this big red cone that's like a semicircle in front of him. Do not be in this, because he will grab you, and then he'll follow it up with a massive knockback, and you will fall off the platform. There's nothing you can do at that point. So anytime you see him create this like melee range semicircle, make sure you're not in it. And then if you're not in it, just make sure that right afterwards, he's going to do this big yellow knockback AoE. So just make sure you're not in that so you don't get knocked off the platform, and you're ready to go. You will also notice that there are buffs that he has with stacks on them. Your goal in this phase is to wait for the ghosts to appear on the outside of the platform. So you'll see portals appear, you'll see ghosts run out. The portals don't signify it. You'll see a ghost run across and then stop in a spot. And when that ghost stops, it will start an attack that is counterable. If you counter this attack, you'll get a buff on you. And then when you attack Valtan next, you'll remove one of his stacks. So it looks like that. You'll see the ghost come out of him, run to a corner of the arena like this. So this ghost that just spawned on him and then ran over here is now the ghost. And then right afterwards, he'll turn, throw an attack. You want to counter it. You'll get a buff, and then you attack him, and you'll remove one of his stacks. And you want to get rid of all of these. The side benefit of this is every time you successfully counter, it will fill your sidereal bar over here by a small amount. So it helps you fill the bar, gets you closer to a Thyrane for damage, and helps you to take the stacks, the buff stacks that he has off of him. He can still spin in this state. He can still do retaliation in this state, and he can still spawn cow portals on the edge. So just be wary of that. But at this point, you're just in the final stretch. Just make sure you're countering these ghosts regularly, come back in, deal damage, don't get knocked off, don't get grabbed. And, if you build up enough bar, throw out a Thyrane and burn them down, and you're on to victory. You win. And that's the whole fight. Next, let's cover some of these smaller attacks that I didn't cover originally, just because they're, just general, don't get hit by this kind of attack. Very straightforward, but let's make sure, just for the sake of completion, let's talk about them. The first one to talk about is cow portals. He'll put out his hand and dash into a portal and disappear. Then all over the area, you'll get these portals that spawn. You'll create a line that comes out of it, and then a cow will come out of the portal. It's like an image of him. A ghost will come out of the portal and dash forward. These knock up, so you can actually get to a point where you're getting juggled in the middle. The best thing to do is usually just run to the edge or run to a safe spot and just pay attention, as it will deal a good amount of damage. You can get juggled. It's pretty straightforward. Just don't get hit by ghosts, but it is important to know that this exists. Next, in the final phase, the ghost phase, he'll do this 4-directional attack. It is the same every time. He always does this. So he'll start the attack by doing a forward cone, then he'll go back, then he'll go to his left, then he'll go to his right. So knowing this, you can position yourself, depending on if you're a back attack class or a front attack class, whatever. Just be aware that he'll do a front, back, left, right, and just be wary of this. Which is essentially an amped up version of what he does in the first few phases, where he'll attack front, then back, and then a final attack in the front. So you see here, if as a back attack class, I'm hitting the corner, I'm waiting for the back attack and then going right back in, because he always follows the sequence. This transforms into the front, back, left, right later on when he's in the final phases. But early on, it's front, then back, then front. And just to say we covered it, let's recover what we covered in the 60 seconds, which is his 3-hit counter. He will yell and put his axe down. And you'll know the difference based on whether the axe is up over his shoulder, right? So if it's up over his shoulder and is hanging way back, he's about to do the ground attack. If it's underslung where his hand is down and the axe is going upward like this, then he's about to do his counter series. So the way this works, he'll do 3 different counters. If you don't counter these, he will kill everyone, so you need people to counter. There's a catch, though, is when someone counters this attack, they will become silenced, and then they'll start silencing everyone around them. So you need people to go in one by one and then counterattack and just get away from everyone else. You obviously can't counter if you're silenced, but then he'll do another attack. Someone else has to get it, and then they have to step away. So usually you just have to trust people. It's a pretty easy counter. Just get in front of them by yourself, or maybe in pairs of 2, and then counterattack and then get away from everyone. Some people bring panaceas for this, so that if someone screws up and silences everyone, You can just Panacea the Silence and then counter it so you don't die. This can be a wipe, but it's something to know about. The next attack is annoying at first, but as you get better at dealing with it, it becomes much easier. It is this Vengeful Spirit, these Doom Orbs that spawn. So what'll happen is in 4 directions, he will spawn these concentric circle AoEs that look like this. So there'll be a larger circle, a smaller circle, and then there'll be an orb in the middle of this. And then once these spawn, they start pulsing these big AoEs. So if we capture this here, and they're in alternation, and these do knock back as well. And they're pretty frustrating if you're not prepared for it. But he does give you a lot of warning for it. So let's watch that back again. He will do this little step, little dance that he does, and he spawns. The thing that you need to do here is run to the center of it and have someone grab each of the orbs, as you will get benefits for it later once the buff timer or the debuff timer wears off. But usually it's best just to wait these out. They only pulse a couple times, but if you're obviously, you can see that if you're, say you're over here, these do overlap. So you can get caught up between 2 circles and get pushed back and forth and back and forth. Very frustrating. But once you know what's happening, all you have to do is run to the center, grab an orb, get the buff, the timer on yourself, and then just stand in a safe spot on one side. So you can see that as this pulses, you can stand anywhere in here. You can stand anywhere in here. Just kind of find either the center of the map or in between. This mechanic is frustrating at first, but as you practice against it, it gets easier. The only time this can be really frustrating is that he can do it when the arena is very small. And when he does, you can get really unlucky with placement that, there's just no safe spot to stand. That can happen, but just be wary that these things exist. And let's show one time where I get the center of the targeter. So you can see here that you run away from everyone and make sure you're spreading out so that you know when you are the center of the cone. If there's a whole bunch of people standing here, you may not be able to tell who is the center. So you can see how everyone in my raid is now going over here. So now I'm going to aim it here and then go towards this side. The center is easier. I think the easiest way to deal with this, if you're struggling, stand in front of him so that you have the smallest area. At the last second, dash over and then time stop in the yellow. And then you'll take no damage. You won't get knocked back. Everything will be fine. You cannot time stop this red as far as I know. So you wait until it's about to end and then get behind a rock and then you're good to go. I've lost a lot of raid members to this. And then if you get targeted again, which is highly likely, face it away from the raid, know that the rocks explode afterwards, and then make sure that you know that he's about to spin, usually, not always, but usually when he finishes. I want to give a special mention to this attack that he does here. He can do it at any time really throughout the fight, but it's something that I see people get stuck on a lot that really shouldn't happen. It's a very straightforward attack to avoid, and he does it the same sequence every time. So he'll start out, he'll swing his axe back over his shoulder like this, and if you know it's early on in the fight, he's about to do this attack. He will then swing in front of him for a regular attack, and then he'll swing again, and then his third hit will create this safe zone in the middle, and then this safe zone over here, but this big AoE. So again, when you see him cross his axe over his shoulder like that, know that he's about to do 2 frontal attacks, and then a big AoE with a safe spot in the middle and a safe spot on the outside. But he's not done with this combo. So you have 2 options. You can either run into the middle for the safe spot, run to the outside for the safe spot. But know that if you do go in the middle, he follows this up always with a melee range whirlwind attack. So right there, that one, that can do a decent amount of damage to you and knock you back, interrupt your attacks. And then he'll follow that with 2 concentric AoE circles. So when this happens, he does 2 frontals, run to the middle, run to the outside. If you do run to the middle, you can just make sure you step away from him far enough to not get hit by this whirlwind. So you can go stand like right here. When he's done with the whirlwind and you don't get hit by it, then you can step back in and then avoid the following circles. But master this attack. Seeing people take damage from it is always tough, and it can really hurt. A brief note on sidereals for the raid leader. The big sidereal, you have to figure out what you're using your sidereals for ahead of time. The cheesiest way is to use Balthor at 130 and then Balthor again at about X16. This will prevent the ground pound attacks that knock you off. And then this also prevent you from having to do the blue orb mechanic in the very beginning, so that you'll see that when Balthor comes down, he gives you all the protection, and then you have to worry about this AoE slam in the beginning. And then usually if you're building it up enough meter and getting a lot of counterattacks, you can use Thigh Rain in the middle. But preferably, and then once we have hell modes, you're gonna have to do the mechanics just because the damage checks are so tight. So you can use Thigh Rain throughout the fight. and do the blue orbs. But the big thing here is if you're gonna cheese it with Balthor on 130, just know that it can range between 127 and 132. You kind of want to have it down by 131 usually, unless your damage is really high and you're pushing them hard. And the next best spot is to use it at about X16. Throw down the Balthor, and it's right when he's about to do his final transition to the ghost phase. You can then have the damage reduction and the knockback resistance so that you don't get knocked off the platform. But of course, you could always use the cool mechanics like time stop here on the ground pound, or you can just avoid everything perfectly, which you usually have to do for hell mode anyway, and then you can use Thyrane throughout the fight for big damage bursts when you need it most. And that's Valtan Gate 2 Phase 2. This fight is a ton of fun, and there's so much more to come with Vicus, the Cuckoo fight, and of course, Belshazzar and beyond. A lot of cool mechanics and very fun fights to test your favorite classes out on. Let me know if you've already defeated Valtan. Easy mode and hard mode are the same mechanically, just obviously harder and scaled up. But let me know if you've already defeated Valtan. If you have any other questions, of course, you can pop on my stream and ask me there, or you can ask down in the comments, and I'll do my best to get back to people that are down there. But that is Valtan. If you enjoyed yourself today, leave a like down below. You can support me and my work on Patreon and view Patreon exclusive content, link in the description. Thank you so much for tuning in, and I'll see you in the next one.